Black psychology, as I have been teaching, comes out of a theory, not necessarily a theory in the sense of a hypothesis, but it proposes that African people are a non-dichotomous people, and that their existence is the positive manifestation of the existence of God. Now, that could be termed as a materialistic God, which a lot of people who have read Marx would understand. But what it means is that religion, or a sense of ethics, is the essence of African development of the psyche. So that there is no original sin. Therefore, the color that people are is neither a blessing nor a curse, but it is rather a reflection of climate and all of those things that identify a person or a people with land, with flora and fauna, and with whatever god or gods they believe operate in that territory. So you take away the notion of original sin, you place the human being in the center of his or her own life. Therefore, the drama, the enactment of their behavior, the enactment of their activity becomes ethical. And it is ethical because they are the positive manifestation of God, not the negative manifestation of God. Therefore, to be black is not the manifestation of the sin or the curse of God as the inherent evil of African people. This life then is ordered around three basic principles. One is the moral order, the other is the natural order, and the other is the one which encompasses the Godhead. First, it places the human being in relation to all other things. It says that the human being has a responsibility for being at the top of the animal pyramid, and therefore it has a responsibility for itself and for all other species of life. The primary responsibility is to respect and to take care of, one, the human species, and all other animal forms, flora and fauna, which you could say today is basic ecology. But our parents were talking about that at the very beginning of time. There is also the relationship between the human species, one to the other. That is the relationship of people within a family. It is the responsibility of the parents to be the custodians of the life. They are only the custodians, and the primary purpose of parents is to take care of the generation to whom they are the custodians, so that that generation will, one, be the continuum, and two, the affirmation that a supreme being or God does exist, because it is that group which will be the potential for the parents of the future. At the same time, they are assuring themselves of ancestral or antiquity, because they will become the grandparents of the children to whom they are caring for at that time. So that the things work in a kind of a triad, but the triad is overlaid from the center going backward, rather than starting in the middle and going forward. The future is only assured because the present exists. The present exists because the past exists. Then you have the relationship of, and the acknowledgement of what the environment does. Everybody, most African religions say that they know who their gods are by the particular gifts that they give. In my area, we say that the bananas are gods, and fruits and vegetables that grow wild, that do not require human hand. Those are God's promises, or I'm using God as a generic term. Those are God's assurances that this being will never forsake, because it will provide the sustenance of the creatures that are created. So that there is this inherent then activity, which that is what I call behavior. It is the activity that we engage in, and so therefore the behavior is supposed to be good. And therefore when you do your duty, it is a form of worship, so that there is no separation between when you worship, how you worship, if you worship, and if you live. To live is to be in a state of goodness. And that is the balance that we struggle for. So that when we talk about what Samori is saying about recognizing that part of us that doesn't do what it should do, when we violate the order, when we do not, as my grandmother used to say, if you give your brother bread for stone, he will give you back broken teeth. That is what we have right now in Africa and in the African world. And it's this part that I'd like to focus on now and sort of bring it to a close. What we have done is we have seen ourselves surrounded by a superhuman strength that is called white people. And we have seen ourselves within the interior of that as a weakened, victimized people. Psychologically, it then means that we have been rendered destroyed. It is only in the reclamation, the restoration of the black psyche that we then take ourselves out of this malaise and put ourselves on the stage of humankind. We cannot even imagine that we have the possibility to change some of the most basic things in our lives, lest someone else comes in. One identifies it for us, and then in that definition, therefore, prescribes the treatment. So that what we say when we go these development schemes in Africa, we say we have to go there and teach these women how to be mothers. But they have been mothers all this time, and when they come, they find people. The illnesses that they find, who is responsible? Everybody wants to say who is responsible. When people are left alone, they create and develop within the context of their land, of their geographic, and of their cultural space. You can bring certainly certain kinds of advancements, and I use that in quotes, but the basic structure has to fit, has to be customized, shall we say, to the cultural dictates of where people are. That is, the Jews should not think that just because you cannot introduce tropical fruits in Sweden, that the Swedes are backward, cannot grow, and that there's something innately inferior to the soil of Sweden. It comes out of a climatic difference. Nor should we assume that because we don't have snow in northern Ghana, that there's something wrong and therefore we must import some chemical means of manufacturing snow as we do in Vermont. The two things are not comparable, and they can both exist in their own geographic locations without a need to compare one better or one worse than the other. And so often we get caught up in that. And that is because we haven't the ability to perceive ourselves in the center of the drama of our own lives. And that is what we have to struggle for. To struggle for the currency of ourselves in our lives, to take control of ourselves. If you show me a child who is misbehaving in any classroom from K to 12, I will show you a child who comes from a household where diet is probably a major problem, where there is an excessive amount of fats, where there's an excessive amount of sugar, where there's an excessive amount of salt, and where there is little social intercourse, that is modulated, loving, careful undertones to the information that is passed between the custodians, whoever they are, whether they're the biological parents or not, the custodians in that child's life, and the expectations that are already shared with that child. We are social animals, and we cannot survive without another human species. Therefore, all that we learn from each other, even when we learn something negative. You cannot have a language around a child that is very inhumane, very ungracious, and expect that child to go to school and act like a good little girl and listen. Where does the child take the rage? What does the child do about how horrible they feel? How can you say, I know you can do better, when there's nothing in that child's life, no human being has said to that child, I care enough for you that I will not let you be hungry. I will give you a balanced diet. I will give you sufficient clothing. I will teach you basic social skills so that you will be able to present yourself in the best light possible, which will bring honor to you and therefore perhaps to me, instead of putting it the other way around. We have to redefine our goals, our values. What is it that we see in that child? The child is not an extension of ourselves. We are the custodians of our children. That means we are the primary caretakers. That is our responsibility by even having life ourselves. And it is only that way that we can continue, And that goes for all the other things that we do. We cannot say that I'm selling this particular thing because if I don't sell it, somebody else will. You've already compromised, which means at that point that you know you're doing something that is wrong. How you make it end does not take away nor begin to restore your own psyche, because you are participating in a negative activity. We have to be able to say that it's all right if we don't get 95s or our children don't get 95s on an exam. We have to be able to say, I will love you if you get a 70. I would like it if you got a 90, but I will still love you if you get a 70. We have to be able to love ourselves even when we're not as good as we would like to be. And there you can borrow a European psychologist. Maslow has this thing called self-actualization. And the last part of this test has to do with bringing all the elements of a human being together. And out of that bringing one's self into being. And he says that a self-actualized person is one who has the capacity to love themselves along with the good, and I'm using absolute terms, the good and the bad, the positive and the negative. Too often in our quest to reconstruct the African glory, we cite only the glory. We do not cite the negative. It is only in knowing what is wrong so that we could know what not to do. Otherwise, we may find ourselves repeating too many things that would best be left in antiquity. One of those things, and I'm winding down, one of those things we're going to talk about tomorrow night on WBAI is this new business about whether or not clitoridectomy is something that we need to consider as something to be occurring in the 20th century. I would, just because it occurred in the past and therefore there was a reason for it, so consequently it should be kept alive because there is a reason for it. Well, at one time we did a lot of things, and we have stopped doing those things because we have found that they had deleterious consequences psychologically and physiologically. There is no reason to continue doing something wrong. And that is, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, that is the end of it. What I would like to see us do would be to really be able slowly develop this muscle, this psychological apparatus, consider it a muscle. I would like to see us exercise this muscle daily to find one thing that we really see as our strength, and then find one thing that we see as our weakness, and try to develop the stronger thing so securely that we will begin by process of elimination to decrease the weakness. Someone who suddenly has had a life that was organized around drinking, around alcohol, and I'm talking about when it is out of control. There are certain social things and physiological things that you have done to yourself and your environment in that process of drinking. Yes, you have gone to work, but you've organized other aspects of your time and demands of your body where that alcohol has been there. You cannot suddenly cut it out because, one, the body has already developed a dependency on it. So it will create a response in you, not just the urge to drink, but also the inability to function without it because you have made your body function with it. So you have to know what you need to put in your body that would compensate and at the same time build the body now that you are no longer doing the drinking excessively. And at the same time, because you have dislodged this, you have to now also create other social activities that you can do that will also be as rewarding and at the same time will be positive for you. That is how you have to think of yourself. Because you live in an environment of international oppression, whether it is racism, whether it is sexism, whether it is class or cultural differences, because you live in an environment where that has permeated our lives to such minutia that you have within one family people arguing over whether or not they should be traditional Yoruba in 1992, having not been on the continent for 500 years, right? Christians and Islam, or even Judaism, or even atheism. All of that exists sometimes in the context of one family. But what was the social fabric of that family unit constructed around, and what was the goodness of it? So you look at the philosophical imperatives of that family and say the strength of this family has been organized around whatever. And if I go away from that, I have to be able to identify and take the strength of that family unit into wherever I go. And if that new place that I'm going does not accommodate in a glorious way what I have brought with me, it may not be the structure I need to go. It does not mean that you cannot appreciate Judaism, Islam, Christianity, Yoruba, Buddhism, or whatever. It just means that there's been a cultural and a psychic history that you may not be ready for that at that time. So I would like to just close with, because Samori said that there would be time for questions and answers. I would just like us to try to get ourselves in a psychological state where we would not have to compare the strengths of ourselves with past glories in a very general way of Africa. That is not to say that we do not use that as inspiration for where we should be and where we need to go beyond. And nor at the same time do we need to demonize any other group any other group for their extreme lack of humanity in their dealings with us. They are just as psychologically destroyed for doing what they're doing as we may be for having been the recipients. But I assure you, racism is a social disease. It is sexually transmitted, just like syphilis. It is contagious, and it is deadly, and it destroys the host and the recipient. It is when you destroy the germ that both the host and the recipient have the possibilities of physical and psychological health. Thank you.